Hello. This is the Ancient History Lecture for Monday, the 7th of September, 2021. And we started class with a reminder that people should turn their electronics into the pockets, which will hold them until the end of class. I shouldn't be talking during conversation. Return your markers, please, to the plastic box on my desk. Also, that people should check their uniforms and make sure they are proper, and that if they need to use the fluid and the wipes to cleanse their area, be my guest to do so. We've also taken the silly test, which is my answer to the state of Idaho's requirement that I quantify your knowledge progress over the year. So this is a before test where people probably did not score as well as they normally do, and where we will take a similar test in April or May. Presumably you will score better. That shows that both you are doing your job. Open notes, please. And then I am doing my job. So you have your notebook open, and you have your note pack open to the second page side. Your note pack open to the second page side. I see a number of people who do not have their note packs open. That should be done. My board notes and note packs are a lot like a skeleton. They alone are not sufficient to constitute a life form. They are, however, there to help you. So that's the structure upon which you will put things. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about today is not on the second page side. But if you read the title of the second page side, you have a notion of what it is that we are beginning. Every year with ancient history, I do an overture of human history. And that overture wasn't what I originally planned when I first started teaching history. Bless you. And again, bless you. On September the 11th, 2001, I was in Hiram, Maine, in the foothills of the White Mountains. I was beginning my second full-time year as a teacher. I had done other things. I didn't become a teacher until I was 35. And I worked out in a modular a lot like this one, except it was farther away from the entrance to the high school. I began a lesson on Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, a simulation called Valley of the Beard God, where students would run tribes of nomadic hunter-gatherers as they encountered various problems. That was period one. It was a beautiful day. And around 9 or so, the first period ended, and I had period 2 as a planning period, much like I do this year. So I had to help arrange for a student to transfer from one of my sections to another. So I needed to go see the guidance counselor. So I shut my room, I locked it, I headed out across campus to the entrance to the high school, which was by a set of stairs that had a television set suspended from the ceiling. Normally, the area is filled with conversation and noise. People had a 10-minute break between periods 1 and 2, and kids usually got a snack or a drink, and they touched base with their friends before going on to period 2. When I opened the door, there were plenty of people there, more people than usual, actually. But it was much quieter than normal. Everyone was looking up at the screen. One of the people was the guidance counselor, so I walked over and I glanced up at the screen. And I saw a jetliner crash into one of the World Trade Center towers. Now, I, at my best, in a crisis, go cold. And I went cold at that moment. Cold was, that's probably an act of war. That is what occurred to me, not an accident. But there was nothing I could do about it. So I tended to business. I walked up to the guidance counselor and started talking to him about transferring that student. He wasn't really paying attention to me. He was watching. And then there was a second plane that hit the other tower. They were rebroadcasting. Now, I, as a young child, grew up watching Yamazaki's Twin Towers being built. In the late 60s and early 70s, I remember every time we went from the Bronx down to lower Manhattan, seeing the buildings getting taller and taller. And like most New Yorkers, I had a favorite skyscraper, the Empire State Building. King Kong climbed it. And even though there was a King Kong movie in 1977 where he climbed the World Trade Center, it still didn't count. I remember there was an acrobat that set up a tightrope between the towers. This was completely against the law. And he walked across the tightrope. And the thing about a building 110 stories tall is there's a lot of wind up there that nobody gets at ground level. Skyscrapers have to be built with sway, or it just won't work. So this guy is dealing with two swaying skyscrapers, and he's walking across. And this was also in the 1970s. I didn't see it, but I happened to be in New York when it happened. I happened to be wearing this tie that day. You will notice this Empire State Building within the background, the Twin Towers. All of these memories flooded back. I had been to the top of the Twin Towers on several occasions. Because, unlike many New Yorkers, my grandparents took me to the sites. I was a little kid. And I knew that each tower had been designed by the architect Yamazaki to house 5,000 people. So, conceivably, we could be looking at 10,000 human beings going through hell. The break time ended, period 2 began, and one of my colleagues who had a cable-ready TV in his room invited anyone who wanted to up to his room to continue watching the news. We were stunned. As we watched the towers burn, I'll try to explain to you why we were stunned. We had been at peace, a state that you don't know because you've never been in a country really at peace. We had won the Cold War. The Soviets were no longer a threat. China had not yet arisen to be a new threat. The Muslims did their terrorism, but it never was a very big deal to those of us at home. We were at peace. We were relaxed. Not just as individuals in our lives, but as a nation. Now, one tower being hit by one jetliner, the odds are still ridiculously against. 2 towers being hit by 2 jetliners, that's human action. So I knew it was an attack. And my colleague, as we watched the towers burn, said, notice how all the shots are from miles away. That's true. You could see the Twin Towers. From my grandparents' apartment in the Bronx, many miles away, the Twin Towers were to our southwest, and they dominated that part of the skyline. We could see Manhattan, and we could see the Twin Towers. And all the shots were from miles away. And that's for a reason, a couple of reasons. And then one of the towers collapsed as if it had been set with demolition charges, right into its basement hole. I don't remember choosing to do this. I just remember standing and very quietly saying, this means war, and heading down to my classroom because I needed to do something. Between the time I had left hit my friend's classroom and arrived at my own, second tower had also collapsed. And I prepared the first iteration of the lessons that I'm going to teach you over the next week to week and a half or so. Because By the time the first tower collapsed, there was a claim of responsibility from the Al-Qaeda organization, supported by the Taliban in the mountain fastnesses of Afghanistan. There was also a shot of Palestinians, especially women, on the street giving their ululating cry, cheering that the towers burned. Once I knew it was Islamic extremists, I knew why the attacks had happened. And I was blessed. I had a friend who worked at the Twin Towers, whose company arrived in the year or two after a car bomb tried blowing the places up in 1993, and they had left about 6 months before the 9/11 attacks. They had found another office. So I didn't have a personal friend facing what was happening. I was also blessed because I knew why. And for the next 2 days, I taught a very quick version of the lessons. I'm going to go into much more depth with you. So that's the rest of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, period 1. And by Thursday, American airspace had been closed down. People were still in shock. And the news media, being their normal scummy selves, decided that it was time to start showing views from closer up of people jumping and falling from 110 stories. And they began broadcasting the last cell phone calls of people from the towers. At that point, I advised my students to stop watching the news for a while because it no longer was news. It was pornography. The pornography of blood and the pornography of death. And a wise person doesn't expose themselves to that. Tomorrow, I'll go into the details of the attack. Thank you. Have a good day. So he had already volunteered to serve.
He told me that they were being drilled when a drill sergeant ran in and told them to turn on the news. I'll watch it.
It's like nothing I ever experienced in my life.